Hey tribe, welcome back to the Primal Path podcast, where we're here to help you move freely and live fully. Today we're going to talk about a subject I know nothing about, so I spent a lot of time doing the research. We're going to be talking about the different stages of the menstruation cycle. Is that what?
You can call it that.
I never know.
The menstrual cycle.
Menstrual cycle. I never want. It's one of those things that you're just not comfortable with because I don't experience. But we're going to be talking about the menstrual cycle, and we're talking about how it influences our training and our nutrition today. This is a somewhat new hot topic, I would say, relatively.
I feel like more people are talking about it now than they used to. It used to be something that it's like, don't talk about it because it's gross and embarrassing. But like now, or everyone felt that way. I feel like, but now people are like, I feel like people are a lot more comfortable now, where they're seeing like how it actually affects things. So now it's become more of a conversation.
Yeah, and I'm here to learn because, I could read all the stuff on the internet, but it's going to help. Obviously, it's going to help me out for my clients and things like that. So there is a big benefit to doing this, and I have the feedback of having clients that obviously go through their stages, and I've never really adjusted their training. It's something that I haven't thought about.
They're probably not telling you when they're having a rough time either.
Yeah, right. They're right.
Yeah.
But the good part is that this is not something I'm gonna be like, hey, well, think about this. But it is something for me to consider if I do start seeing these trends every 4 weeks or something like that. That's going on the training volume, something like that.
Or maybe they want to tell you after this. Maybe they'll feel more comfortable telling you.
At the same time, yes, that's totally fine. I'm here to help. So let's kick that off. First, let's start off with 4 stages of the menstrual cycle.
Yeah. So, first I just want to kind of clarify what the menstrual cycle actually is, because a lot of people kind of get this confused. People think it's like it ends like when, or like the end of it is like when you actually like get your period, but that's like the start of it. So it's like the start of the cycle is the day that you get your period to like the day that like the next one starts, or the day before the next one starts. Is like that's the full cycle. So it's typically about 28 to 29 days, but it can range anywhere from like 23 to like 36. So everyone's kind of different with that. I like to say there's like 2 to 3 stages. It can vary based on the person that you talk to. But I like just to keep it simple and say there's like 2 like main phases and like 1 event that happens in between them. It's kind of the way that I'll put it. But phase 1 is called your follicular cycle, or your follicular phase is what it's called. So that's like the day that you start your period. That's when the follicular phase starts. And then it ends like pretty much right up until ovulation, which is the big event. That's when the follicular phase ends, ovulation. And then phase 2 is your luteal phase. And that is from right after ovulation until you start your next cycle, when you get your next period. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense to you. Yes, it makes sense, I'm sure, to a lot of people. But since I'm just going off of relatively what I read, I will say, yes, I thought that was the end in my guy mind. That was the end. But when I did the research, they put menstruation as the first thing on the cycle.
Yeah.
And I have menstruation, follicular, ovulation, and luteal.
Yeah. So that is still right. That's still right.
But so menstruation is follicular.
That would be like that's part of the follicular phase.
Okay,
It's the first I would say like maybe 3 to 7 days of the follicular phase, depending on the person and how long their period lasts. But that's I guess that would be like phase 1 of the follicular phase.
I guess they kind of break it down to those 4 phases, so it lines up with the 4 weeks to probably make it easier for people like me.
Yeah. So the follicular phase is typically 2 to 3 weeks. The first week of it is when you get your period, and then it can be another week or another 2 weeks depending on the person. Ovulation is 1 day. That's the event. It happens in 1 day, and then you go into the luteal phase, which is typically 2 weeks. That one's a lot more consistent as far as the time frame. Typically the length of someone's cycle, if it's 23 days, 36 days, 40 days, 28 days, whatever, that depends more on how long the follicular phase is, because that one can vary. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks, it could be longer than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's your overview of what the cycle kind of looks like.
It just makes me have lots of questions. That's it. Maybe you want to ask more questions. On things in general, I'll just say the questions on if it varies, is it very like, hey, this person's a 32-day person, this is a 28-day person, or can it adjust on the cycle? Like, can it adjust, like, when I was 18, it was 28 days it would happen, and now that I'm 30, it's
typically
32 days. Is there like
typically as you get older, the follicular phase might get a little bit longer as you get older. Like, it might be like, maybe if you're younger, like it's 2 weeks. Maybe when you're like 35, it's 3 weeks or something like that. But it'll vary like person to person too.
But like nutrition, does that play a role in health and on the consistency of how often it happens?
It can, yeah. Like, for one thing that like plays a huge role in like your hormone balance is your fat intake. So any of the clients that I coach, like if they look at, and if they're doing like calories or macros or anything like that, and they look at like what their like macro is for their macro goal for fat, it's never below 60. Because if you're dipping below 60 grams of fat consistently as like a woman with an active cycle, you're like risking having imbalanced hormones. It's just not enough fat to support like proper hormone balance. So that's why like even if they're in a calorie deficit, they're never below 60 grams, because that's really important to make sure that things are still well balanced. So that's like an important part of like keeping your hormones in a good place, is your fat intake.
It's good to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like fat is a good thing. Fat is a good thing.
Yes. I do also want to say and put this out there that we're providing like information, so we want to make sure that you guys are doing your own research on it.
Yeah. You can talk to your doctor about it too. We're not like obviously medical doctors or anything.
Absolutely. We're just kind of putting that knowledge out there for you guys to do a little bit more research, and most importantly, that even with this knowledge, it's on a person-to-person basis. Mm-hmm. Everyone has an individual experience, where some days some people in a certain stage might feel entirely exhausted. Another person might be feeling really good. So even the information that we're talking about with nutrition and with training, like, take it, use it as a tool in case those days come and you're like, wow, I really don't understand why I don't have it today. Be like, oh, it could be because of this, because I'm in this stage. But there's also the fact that, like, if you live by these rules that at this stage we want to be gentle and easy, you might be missing out on valuable training. And if your body's feeling good, there's nothing wrong with doing more. So most importantly, like we always talk about, go off of how your body feels above else. Like above everything else, go off of that.
Yeah, exactly.
So when we talk about, let's start off with training initially. Like when we're talking about training within the cycle, get into that. Like, how should, if we're trying to align it with our cycle, what is the type of training that we should be doing at the different stages?
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through the phases again. I'll kind of talk about how like your energy and stuff like that might change and stuff. So in the follicular phase, this is just information for you guys so you're aware of what's kind of happening. But in the follicular phase, estrogen is like progressively rising. And it'll peak right before ovulation. Once you ovulate, it'll start kind of declining during the luteal phase. But when estrogen is going up, you're typically like your mood increases, your energy increases. So that's really a good time for maybe you to try doing some more high intensity interval training, like a high intensity workout, maybe pushing your lifts a little bit more. If you have like a peak week where you're trying to like hit a PR or something, that might be a good time, like within those 2 weeks. Sometimes it's a little bit tougher. Obviously, the first day you start your period, like the first couple days, it's a little bit tougher because you might be getting cramps and stuff. But typically, once you get past like the first 3 to 5 days of that, that's a good time to like really bump up the intensity of your workouts. Ovulation, like I said, it's 1 day. You might initially feel like really good when you hit ovulation. So that's another one where like some people don't feel great that day, and some people feel awesome that day, and they're like on top of the world. So that's another one.
So the testosterone's up during that time.
Your estrogen like is like peaking pretty much at that point, and testosterone as well is on the rise. Right? Yeah, both are on the rise too, which is why you might feel stronger because your testosterone is actually up too. Yeah, testosterone and estrogen will rise during the follicular phase. So that's like I said, ovulation is like kind of depending on the person. And then the luteal phase is kind of where it gets a little tricky. That's when the estrogen kind of starts to plummet, and you go from this like estrogen dominant environment to like a progesterone dominant environment. So that's when progesterone goes up. So when that happens, that's when you kind of start getting the mood fluctuations, the mood swings. You start feeling a lot more bloated, and like you're kind of just like retaining water. That's where your energy might start going down, or your sleep kind of starts suffering. I know for me personally, like my sleep like goes like just like down the toilet. For those like at least like that like last week, that's where my sleep really just like kind of goes down. And that's where you kind of want to start really listening to your body and maybe dialing back on the intensity depending on how you feel. If you feel good, you might only not feel good for a couple days. Some people, it's like the 2 weeks from hell. And that's where you want to like kind of decrease the intensity, maybe do a little bit more like gentle movement, maybe like bring in some yoga or some like stretching or like breathing exercises are really good. Maybe more walking versus running and stuff like that.
Lower impact.
Yeah, lower impact stuff. Things that like,
still
yeah, stuff like
zone
that's where you.
cardio.
I was gonna say more like zone 2 cardio instead of like zone 4 blowing your brains out type of thing. But like I said, it depends on the person. I know people where they only like kind of feel like a little bit not that great for like 2 days. I know people, like I said, that it's like 2 weeks and they're just like out for 2 weeks. So it really depends. But that's kind of where you would want to make those shifts to training.
Yeah, so with my research, my extensive research, I had on the follicular stage is where you have that strength is going to be really high. We're going to be feeling good. You want to be hitting those high intensity workouts, trying to hit some PRs that are really good. And then during ovulation is actually the PR week that it's saying. According to it. So like,
that's when your hormones probably are at their highest. Like your hormones that are gonna benefit your strength and your energy. That's when they're at like their highest is like right around that time. But typically it's like hard to pinpoint ovulation.
Because I was gonna say, because if you could do that,
it's
you
hard
could be
to
like,
pinpoint
I'm gonna
it.
set PR day on the training calendar, like, and make sure that it aligns with that. I would figure there wouldn't really be a downside to that, right? But I guess you can't pinpoint it.
It's tough to pinpoint it. Like if you've been tracking your cycle like in an app or something like that, it'll probably give you a general like range of like these are like your ovulation days and you're probably going to ovulate within this time frame. For some people they can actually like feel it happen, like they'll feel like a pop like on one side and like maybe a little bit of pain or something. If you have like I have a client that has an Aura ring and she could tell like when she was getting close to her cycle, because typically like right before ovulation, I believe, let me just check my information. Typically like your body temperature will drop right before ovulation. So if you have like an Aura ring or something like that kind of measures that, it'll tell you what your body temperature is. And then once you ovulate, it'll start increasing. So that can be a good indicator too, kind of where you are in your cycle as well. But yeah, it's kind of hard to pinpoint it. It's like if you track your cycle, that's the best way to probably figure out like maybe where you are, or like if you log your symptoms like throughout the cycle, you can kind of figure out like when you're feeling really good, maybe patterns, and like when you feel really good and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't feel good anymore, everything sucks, and then you know, okay, I probably just ovulated the day before.
So it's kind of like more of that after. Most people know it after the fact.
Yeah, typically it's after. It's like it's like where you wake up and you're like, oh my god, my life sucks. But yesterday felt so great. So but that's maybe a good way to know.
Yeah.
Like
you just missed your PR window.
You just missed, and then like now you have to PR this week.
And then it went into the luteal, which was more of a restorative and like yoga, more resistance, using more resistance bands. Like you can still keep the reps really high.
You can still train. You just want to be more aware of like what
you don't have max load.
Yeah. Or maybe if you're going into train and you're doing like the same, like you're doing like a progression of the workout, it just might be a time to give yourself a little bit more grace. Like this like you're doing a back squat and the weight just isn't going anywhere that day. Like a weight that you've hit like multiple times, you just can't get up that day. And that's like a time to be like, okay, hold on, where am I in my cycle? Like everything feels heavy today, and just not get like upset or frustrated with yourself, and just like kind of understand what's going on and then move on.
Yeah, which I think is the most important piece of this information. I would say is that you could not beat yourself up and be, understand a little bit of a reason why your testosterone and estrogen aren't as high, and therefore it could be affecting your reps and stuff like that. And then it also said during menstruation, gentle movement and reduce intensity.
Yeah. I would say like that's like
But I feel like menstruation is part of the follicular in my thing, so it's thrown me off.
Yeah. So it kind of it depends on the person. So typically the first like when I say like follicular phase is like your PR phase, like it's typically like after the first few days of your period, because that's when the symptoms kind of start to go away. It's like you might feel kind of crappy for the first like few days because that's when you're getting cramps and that's when like you're feeling really bloated. And once you kind of get over that hump, then like it's like all the symptoms disappear and you're feeling really good. So that's kind of what it is. I would say the first like few days of your cycle, and it again depends on the person. If you're having a rough time, that's where you might want to kind of back off on the intensity of the exercise. Like gentle movement can be really good with like increasing blood flow and like helping decrease the cramping. So that's what I would probably do there. Yeah.
So follicular, you want to be lifting weights, strength training.
Yeah.
Luteal, you want to be keeping in mind,
backing off if you need to.
You're going to be training.
Yeah.
Give those reasons. So now we kind of talk about that training. Let's like transfer over to nutrition. So how are we going to be training with hormonal fluctuations?
Yeah. So in the follicular phase, like again, that's where you're probably going to feel the best. Your mood is up. You're feeling really good. So you're probably going to experience less cravings. One, because you like emotionally feel better. And two, like just with the rise in estrogen, it'll kind of keep your appetite a little bit more in check. So you might experience that your appetite is a little bit lower, or like you're not feeling like starving in between your meals and stuff like that, or you're just feeling like when you start to get hungry, you're not like ravenous, if that makes sense. So like your follicular phase is like that I guess would be like more of like your normal hunger levels. Like you're probably gonna like feel a little bit more at ease with like how you're eating and stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, balance.
Yeah. Like just eat a balanced diet. Like you're like it's probably like just you're gonna probably feel a lot better with like how much you're eating and stuff carbs, like that. Yeah, just eat your normal
diet.
Yeah, eat your normal diet with your protein, fats, carbs, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like during obviously for the follicular and ovulation. Then when we get into the luteal, we're going to be managing cravings, fats, and fibers.
Yeah, so the luteal phase is kind of where it starts to get a little tricky. That's where you're going to start noticing a lot more cravings. You might actually feel hungrier too. So in the luteal phase, like your body, let me just pull this up real quick. So I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. So the luteal phase, that's when your body is like basically preparing the lining of the uterus to receive an egg that was released during ovulation. This takes like a lot of energy for your body to do this. Like your body's doing a lot of work. So that's why you're going to feel hungrier. Like a lot of times people are like, why am I so hungry? Oh my God. And they're trying to like eat the same amount of food that they've been eating, or like they're like in their head saying like, don't have that snack. You can't eat this because you're going to be eating too much. Like your body is actually burning through more energy during this time. So your caloric needs might increase from anywhere from like 100 to 300 calories per day. Like this doesn't mean that like you need to eat all food. Like this is like maybe have an extra snack or make one of your meals a little bit bigger.
So it's kind of like when women are breastfeeding, they're burning supposedly quote unquote extra 500 calories a day by breastfeeding. Repairing that lining is doing like this. It's different. I don't want to say that it's the same. I'm trying to make a comparison where like
you're not like repairing the lining. You're just getting the lining ready because your body is like, we're gonna have a baby. Like your body is like thinking you're gonna get pregnant. So like your body is preparing for this, and then if you don't get pregnant, then you get your period and goes all over again. But that like your body like doing that and getting you prepared for that like is a lot of work for it. So you're just going to naturally burn through a lot more calories because your body is doing extra work compared to the follicular phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It definitely makes sense. I was trying to make a comparison, but your body's just doing more work in general.
Yeah, so I would say that would be kind of the big thing, and like I would say like a nutrition adjustment that you could make, and I know people that have done this. I'm working on this with a couple of my clients is after like for their first 2 weeks, we're kind of tracking like their cycle like based on the first day they get it, and then I'm just kind of like taking a guess of where their ovulation is, and then taking a guess of when they're in the luteal phase, and then I'm increasing their calories by like 1 to 300 or about by about 5% for those 2 weeks. And I have like a client that just started doing this, and it helped control her cravings or kind of keep them a lot more in check. because sometimes the craving is like you're just like really hungry and like you also want food. Food just seems more appealing at that time too. But it helped her not to overeat because she had more food available. So she just had an extra snack. And I would say at that time too, you probably want to have like more of like a carb based snack. That's what your body's going to crave too. And your body is a little bit like less sensitive to insulin. So you're going to want to kind of give a little bit more carbs and stuff too, just to kind of keep everything in check.
That's good to know. I have from the interwebs. During menstruation, we were looking at iron-rich foods. We want lots of hydration. Obviously, that makes sense. Follicular, we're looking at protein and complex carbs. Obviously, that's going to be the same time that you're going to be doing your training, which is going to be a high strength, high intensity workouts, things like that. So keeping the protein and complex carbs keeps your body nice and balanced. Ovulation, we just want a general balanced diet. And then in the luteal phase, we're just working on managing cravings. We're looking at putting healthy fats, like you were talking about, making sure that we're above that 60 grams. Is that what you're talking about in general? Yeah,
60 grams or more in general, yeah. During the luteal phase too, like because another thing too to kind of keep in mind, I don't know if this is too sciencey, but there's these things called prostaglandins that are like inflammatory chemicals that are like produced by the body. They're produced naturally by the body. And typically they're produced in response to like an injury or something like that. But like when your body is getting close to the start of the cycle, or it's like getting the uterine lining ready to like have like a baby, that's when that stuff kind of like spikes up a little bit more. And it can be a lot tougher on the body to that. It can cause cramping and stuff like that. But typically when that happens as well, like you'll experience slower recovery from your workouts. And just because the body, there's a lot more going on too. So you're going to want to make sure that your protein intake is up and you're not low on protein at that time. Something that like I'll experience like in those 2 weeks is I'll have like a much tougher time recovering from my workouts. Like I'll be sore for like 3 days from a workout that like I was sore for like a day, like a couple weeks ago. So that's a time too that you want to make sure you're putting an extra emphasis on protein to make sure that you're recovering. So that's important as well. If we want to like dive into some of like the actual like vitamins and minerals and stuff like that, yeah.
I mean, because honestly, like, you know, these aren't the things that you know, when I'm trying to research this information.
Yeah.
I'm going off of just, you know, what the internet says. So it's nice diving into any supplementation, strategies for eating or meal prep, or adjusting caloric intake.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, nerd out. You know, that nerd out.
Yeah, no. So like, I mean, I just want to like say too, I'm not a doctor, so I can't actually tell you like take vitamin D, take this. I can be like, that might be like a good thing, like that might be helpful for your body, but I can't tell you or prescribe it to you or anything like that. And like it also like, and like I had a client ask me too, like, should I be like doubling up on supplements like the week before my cycle? Like that's not really how it works. I would just make sure that like you're taking the supplements that are going to benefit you most. Like the best way to know what supplements you should be taking is by doing blood work and talking with your doctor and figuring out what you're deficient in. But just a general overview of things that can be helpful is like B vitamins can help kind of decrease some of the symptoms or help manage some of the symptoms of PMS.
Like B complex?
Like a B complex. So specifically that's more related to like cognitive function and like reducing anxiety, which typically like cognitive function will be tougher for you to like focus and like get things done and stuff like that, maybe like the week or two before you start your cycle. So that's a good one to make sure that you're like sufficient in or supplementing with it if you're not.
Mushrooms, just like we talked about in the past podcast, cognitive function, brain health, all that stuff.
Yeah, all
mushrooms
that stuff
are good supplements. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, exactly. Magnesium is another really good one. So, and that can help kind of manage your mood. But magnesium also, depending on the type you take, but magnesium glycinate works as like a muscle relaxer, so it can help especially with like the cramping that you'll get like toward the start of your cycle. And it can also help like lower insulin resistance, so it can improve cycle regularity too. So just some other things to kind of keep in mind. But I would say the main takeaway from magnesium is that it can help support your mood and help reduce the cramping.
Yeah, and you're talking about doubling up on vitamins. I'll dive a little bit deeper into that. All vitamins in our body have different like quote unquote half-lives. I don't know the right terminology, but they can stay in our body for a lot longer time. So we can take like vitamin A that we get in red meat and plenty of other things. When we take that it can stay in our body for up to 2 years, that we can still be utilizing that vitamin A, where some vitamins will only last a couple weeks, some will last a couple months. So if you are taking a daily vitamin of, 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C every single day, like your body is now spending time getting rid of that, and you get rid of those, you have to pee it out or sweat it out, if it's fat soluble or whether it's water soluble. Not that, pee it out or the other way out. Sweat it out the other way out. But so that's just something to keep in mind. Like, if you are a person who's taking them every single day, fine. I mean, they're one a day, so you're going to be good. And generally, I like to take a couple days of vitamins, then I'll take a day off, take a couple days of it, take a couple days off. Therefore, just for me, in my own head, like, it might not do anything. It could be entirely pointless. But for me, that's kind of the way that I feel that my response to the vitamins, especially like taking something like an animal pack, I take magnesium every day, some NAC, creatine. But I don't always like to just always have this huge list of fish oils and all that other stuff. So I kind of do it like seasonally. Well, I'll go, if I'm going to be doing a lot of like stuff in the wintertime, I like to be more heavy on fish oils, stuff like that, glucosamine, things like that. They're going to be helpful in my joints in the winter. Then when I'm going into the summertime, or spring and summer, I'm looking at more like allergies. So I'm taking like NAC. I'll start taking more creatine because it's the summer and I want to like keep that water retention in my muscles. I'll be sweating more. So, and I kind of adjust the different supplementation, different vitamins throughout the entire year, so I'm never stuck on something, to allow my body just to process all that stuff. So I mean, so it's always good to explore with vitamins. The last thing I'll say is that I always like to just vary my intake by one. So I'll add one new vitamin, take it for 30 days or supplement, whatever it is, take it for 30 days, come off of it. Do I feel any difference from my body? And that's usually the telltale, because a lot of times we just start taking these things and we have that placebo effect, which is real. I feel better. We're like, awesome, and just keep on taking it and keep on taking it. But your body might not even need it at that point. So it is always wise, I think, to come off something just to see how your body feels without it. Then you could always go back on it or adjust it or move on to something else or try something else at that point.
And like you might take a vitamin like long enough that like your body kind of like tops it off, like you're feeling like your levels are good, so you don't need to keep taking it too. And then iron too. I think you mentioned iron. Iron is definitely, I mean, you're bleeding, so you definitely need some iron. But if you're like supplementing with iron or just making sure that you're getting like iron rich foods, is going to probably help reduce the PMS symptoms. And then it can also be really good for like especially like endurance athletes that like are just like really like just like depleting that, I think, a lot more, like so especially like if you're an endurance athlete, you're running a lot or you're whatever type of training you're doing and you're getting your period, like I think that would just be probably a good one. Obviously check with your doctor, get your blood work done and stuff like that, but that's probably a good one where you might want to consider like looking into or talking to your doctor about supplementation for that one, just because of the type of training that you're doing. And then the vitamin D is I think that's just a good one. I think especially living in the Northeast, like we don't get enough sunlight. So that's like a good one. I think almost everyone that I've seen like blood work from or like kind of talked to about it and stuff, they've been deficient in it.
If you get a winter, you should be taking a vitamin D.
You could be going outside and stuff like that, but it's not going to be the same. Like as like, I mean, you'd have to sit outside for a long time. To probably like just naturally get like the amount of vitamin D that like you need.
Or you just jump in a sauna for 30 minutes.
Or you just do that.
A shameless plug. IR saunas. That's exactly what they do. So you can do supplementation, or I always try to find and do things without supplementation the best that I can, and try things out. I take vitamin D plenty of times. I still do, but at the same time, it is different when you're getting the IR rays, when you are getting the sun rays actually hitting your body too. But easy up the vitamin D, and you'll get some more energy back. You won't be as tired, especially now we're going into the dark mornings and the early dark nights.
But that's a good one. Then the last one would be omega-3s, and I think that one's like especially important, like because of like I talked about before, the prostaglandins that are like the inflammatory chemicals that your body produces. It's more inflammation in your body. So making sure that your omega-3s are like in a good place is going to help kind of just keep you in a better spot so you're not super inflamed. Again, you can do your blood work, see if you are deficient in omega-3s, you might be fine. But taking an omega-3 supplement, or like I believe it's eating salmon like twice a week. If you eat salmon twice a week, that will get you to where you need to be without having to supplement. So I think I feel like omega-3s are like one that you can definitely get enough of it in your diet if you're eating the right things. You just have to kind of be aware of it and make sure you're getting enough healthy fats.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. Yeah. So let's do a little bit of recap. Let's kind of bring it back, the different stages, what we're, and then how we should be training, how we should be eating. Kind of bring it all together for us, Nadine.
Yeah. So kind of just to recap your like 2 to 3 phases of the cycle. So phase 1 would be your follicular phase. That's from the day that you start your period up until ovulation. Ovulation, the big event. And then once you ovulate, you go right into phase 2, and that would be the luteal phase. And that's about 2 weeks from the day that you ovulate, and then you'll start it all over again. You can say it's 4 phases. You can do menstruation, then going into your follicular phase, ovulation, luteal phase.
And training, once again, we're going to be looking at strength is up, high intensity PR weeks are going to be during the follicular ovulation weeks.
Yep.
And then the luteal, just keep in mind, if you are feeling beat up, it's probably because you are having that drop in testosterone and estrogen. So, you know, restorative,
like more
resistance,
restorative movement,
gentle movement, less impact, low impact.
Yeah, letting your body kind of have a break too. And in that time too, like don't think of it as like if you do need to take a break, don't think of it as like this is a loss in like my training week, because like you're giving your body a break, so it's going to be easier for your body to like have more energy and feel better when you go into the next week.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of keep in mind there too.
And then eating along with that. So we're looking at what we should be eating in the follicular stage.
Like your just regular, well-balanced diet in your follicular phase. Same thing in ovulation. And then once you kind of hit the luteal phase, depending on your experience, you might want to consider bumping up your calorie intake by 100 to 300 calories a day, just because your body is burning through more energy, needs a little bit more food. And that would be like maybe like one extra snack, or like make one of your meals a little bit bigger. Want to make sure you're getting enough protein just so your body can still recover and still has the energy and the nutrients that it needs to recover. And those are kind of the main things that you want to be focusing on there. And then kind of based on maybe what your blood work is, maybe what you know you're deficient in. If you have really heavy periods, maybe consider having a little bit more iron-rich foods. If you tend to have like really bad cramping or just a lot more inflammation, maybe just make sure that your omega-3s are pretty good.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
We really hope, this information was, good to let people know exactly what's going on in those stages. As always, do your own research. Contact your doctors if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out to us at any time. Hit us up on our social media handles. And yeah, thank you for educating me, Nadine, a little bit about this.
Yeah.
If you are a client of mine and it is something, don't be afraid to reach out to me as well. We can talk about it, and we can get you set up as well too. But until next time, thanks for tuning in. Move freely, live fully.